Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the second session in our Sophomore Connections Entrepreneurship Series. Really excited for today's speaker. We're going to follow a really similar structure to our first session. We'll spend about the first 40 minutes or so hearing from Dave. There will be plenty of time for Q&A, and then we'll wrap up with about 15 minutes of continuing on from the reflective exercise we did last week on talents, interests, passions, and skills. So without further ado, let me introduce Dave Alberga. Dave is the spouse of Colgate alum Christine Cernozia from the class of '87. He also has a nephew who's currently at Colgate, so he's got a couple Colgate connections. Dave's a serial entrepreneur, super interesting journey, lots of lessons learned. I'm really excited to have him here today. I think you're gonna really get a lot out of this. So without further wait, let me stop sharing my screen. And Dave, I will hand it over to you.
So I didn't share my screen. Let's try this. Hang on. There, everyone see that?
Yes.
All right, nice. Hey guys, welcome. Small group, so let's just make this kind of fun and interesting, and maybe a little bit, I don't know why it can't be kind of interactive. I have literally 5 slides, so no fear on this thing. I'll give you a little bit of background on me, and then launch into what I kind of view. And I spoke to Carolyn quite a bit about kind of what level you guys are at and what you might be interested in. And I've tried to tailor it to where your experience level is and where your decision processes are. And we can, and if it's too basic, great. We'll jump into Q&A pretty quickly and accelerate. And if there's some stuff in there that you don't get or seems too jargony, I've tried to kind of keep that to a minimum. We can, happy to explain. And if someone wants to put their hand up in the middle of this thing, I'm happy to take questions during it as well. It doesn't have to wait till Q&A. It seems like this can be pretty interactive. How many folks did we end up with, Caroline? About 8 or 10?
11, not including us.
Okay. All right. So let's jump in, and don't be afraid to ask questions at all. Oh, this is interesting. It doesn't want to animate. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I do it here. So here we go. Sorry. So my background, I went to West Point a long time ago, graduated in '84. So I'm kind of an old dude. I went from there obviously into the Army as an infantry officer, and I did a fair amount of time commanding infantry combat teams, and then got out and went to Procter & Gamble in brand management, mostly because I had no idea what I wanted to do. And honestly, I hadn't been trained to understand what the business world was, and I kind of got lucky. My resume got passed to P&G personnel, and it got passed on to brand management, which is kind of the place to be there. And all of a sudden I found myself in Cincinnati selling facial tissue and maxi pads, which at the time, very candidly, was not the most exciting thing, given I had just come out of a pretty exciting role with the Army. So I spent about 3 years at one of the biggest, maybe the biggest consumer packaged goods company in the world. I guess Unilever is probably close. And the greatest lesson out of it was I'm really not that outfitted or psychologically or emotionally for really big company stuff. It's really just not that interesting to me. And so I wasn't sure what I was going to do from there, to be honest. And I ended up applying to business schools and ended up at Stanford Business School through some kind of clerical error. I got in. And wasn't going to let that pass. So ended up 2 years at Stanford Business School and did a degree in economics while I was at Stanford as well, which has been of little use professionally, but was a really good academic experience for me. Actually, a really hard one. And so I'm glad I did it, but it was not fun at the time trying to do both of those degrees at the same time. I went from there to the Boston Consulting Group, which is a strategy consulting firm that some of you may have heard of. It's kind of BC. Everyone talks about the big three, which is BCG, McKinsey, and Bain, and then there's lots of others after that as well. So again, I felt really lucky to get a job offer there, and spent 2.5 years doing really, really high level strategy work for a bunch of large corporations that and ended up very much enjoying that. But for sure, you spend a lot of time writing slides, and less time with ownership of things. And I was ready to own something again. And I don't mean physically own it. I was ready to own a project kind of from A to Z, and you never do that at BCG. You go in, you kind of analyze stuff, you look at a lot of data, you go to them, make some suggestions, and hope they take some of your suggestions, and then you usually move on to the next case. But like I said, I can highly recommend BCG if any of you are looking at that. Very, very difficult place to be professionally. I then was recruited by some kind of my network from Stanford and from BCG to go start a company called CitySearch at the very, very beginnings of the web in I want to say it was the end of 1995, very, very early in the web. And CitySearch was essentially, most of you have probably never even heard of it. It was essentially the first version of Yelp. And we combined that with Ticketmaster Online, the ticketing company, and took that entity from zero to, gosh, I guess it was a couple $2 billion in sales, and took that entity public. So that was really my first big startup. I had done, there's another startup in here that I'm not putting up on here that was, I probably should, that we went straight into the back of a bus after about 2.5 years of really working our butts off. And it was very instructive to me about what I was looking for in my next startup. I actually went from BCG to that startup that I did with a couple classmates from Stanford, and learned an amazing amount, and really got my butt kicked for 2 years. Went from there to CitySearch. That was a really good exit. I guess we were there for about 3.5 years. My wife, Christine, who, as Carolyn said, is a Colgate alum, she was there with me as well, running a big part of product development. And then I went to a company called the Active Network, or active.com, as the CEO. Sorry, at CitySearch, I was the chief operating officer. At Active, I became the CEO. I went in as the CEO to a company that had no revenue at the time. They had raised a little bit of money. A couple of founders had raised a little bit of money and hired me to come in and build it with them. I thought I'd be there for 2 or 3 years. It's a software company, a SaaS software company that was servicing, at the time, principally this participatory sports market. So marathons, triathlons, regular running races, cycling races, things like that. We ended up growing. I thought I'd be there 2 or 3 years and we'd sell it. It was kind of at the height of the web. I went there at the end of '99. And I ended up there for 13.5 years, building it into a company with $500 million in revenue. And we sold it for about $1 billion, a little over $1 billion in 2013. 13, I think. And I have since 13 been avoiding another big operating job, to be honest. I've been asked to run a bunch of companies, and I've just decided, I've got 2 high school age girls, and I've decided that these things suck up all of your time and energy and bandwidth, and I'd rather be a better parent than running another big company. But I have been busy, so I've been making angel investments myself, almost exclusively in people I know or people I worked with in the past. I'm a co-owner in a couple of companies, and I've been, as I said, an angel investor in a couple of companies. The one you probably recognize the most is Peloton. I was in the seed round of Peloton and the first 2 rounds after that, all going back to CitySearch. The founder of Peloton is a really close friend from CitySearch, who I hired at CitySearch and gave him a bunch of responsibility. He helped me build that company. And when he couldn't raise any money for Peloton, I wrote him a check telling my wife that we'll never see it again, but that we have to support people who've been in our network and helped us in the past. And who knew that Peloton would turn into Peloton? Honestly, I thought it was kind of a crummy idea. But I really, really love the entrepreneur, and I really love, the CEO and founder. So look, I invest in people generally. And so it's across a bunch of different sectors. I'm an owner of a music festival in the desert outside of Las Vegas, which is an amazing event called the Rise Festival, Rise Lantern Festival. Of course, this is not the best time to be the owner of a big event like that. I'm a part owner of Gen G, which is it's really an owner of teams within the gaming league. So within video gaming, professional video gaming. So that's very, very kind of forward-thinking stuff, trying to figure out if there's really a professional league that's going to survive or that's going to flourish within video gaming. I'm personally not that interested in video gaming, but the CEO is a very close friend, and I really believe in him. I'm the chairman of the board of a company called GovX, which is really an e-commerce provider to members of the military, first responders, and veterans, things like that. A friend of mine launched a company called Ranch Road Boots, which is incredibly high quality, principally Western style boots out of Texas, although she makes them in Spain. And I just wanted to support her. Another former active person, CEO of Lend, which is a software company that services large events, mostly on the production side. He's been at that now, gosh, I guess he's been at that for 8 or 9 years. And it looks to be maybe turning a corner and turning into a real business. And I'm on the board of a company called Citadel Defense that provides drone defense technology to the special operations community. So mostly forward deployed with special forces and SEAL units. Honestly, I really don't like being in the defense space. But again, the guys who funded Citadel were our close friends and asked me if I'd go in and kind of look after the CEO and help out the CEO. The question I had asked is, why do you want to be an entrepreneur? And so I'm coming from the perspective is that folks on this call are at least potentially interested in becoming entrepreneurs or starting companies. What I would tell you is that there's no hurry. So keep in mind that the vast majority of companies that are founded fail. And what I've found and what I use as an investment thesis is generally companies fail or succeed based on the leadership, not just the CEO, but the senior leadership. And the reason for that, and what you need to look for is what I look for is senior leadership that has kind of done it before and has some bruises. That hopefully they've failed once or twice. Hopefully they've been successful once or twice. But they have shown me through whatever means, maybe they worked on a team that I was running, or maybe they were, some other place in the company that I was involved in, where I got to know that these people were really, really solid and good decision makers. And why do you want to become an entrepreneur? And I think there's probably a little bit of projection here. I wanted freedom from kind of bad. I wanted to stop working for people who were bad bosses, to be honest. I wanted to control my schedule a little bit. Be careful on that one. You get to control it, but the reality is your schedule, you just plan on having no freedom whatsoever schedule wise. And, yeah, you can control it, but every minute of it is going to be full for the first couple of years of starting a business. And when maybe a little bit like school, when you decide to sleep, it's because you've decided you're going to blow off some amount of work that you're just not going to get done. And I wanted freedom of decisions. I wanted to be able to make decisions I felt like when I was at Procter, I spent most of my time kind of managing the organization rather than actually managing the brand. And I wanted to spend time managing the brand, which meant getting decisions more rapidly and actually moving and actually running the brand rather than just spending all my time convincing people of what the right decision was to make. I was looking for freedom of creativity. So again, that comes to, that really ties back to freedom and decision making. I wanted to be able to pursue things that I never would have been able to get management to buy into because they seemed at sometimes a little wacky or a little bit too far off the track. I wanted to be able to pursue some of those with a small percentage of my budget to go, if nothing else, just to really learn as to where the edges of my business should be naturally. I wanted to have more fun than I was having in big organizations. And I will tell you, I've since going to kind of the startup world, starting in, about 93, 94, I started 93, I guess. I I could not have had more fun professionally. It was very, very stressful, very difficult most of the time, but also really fun. Sorry about the dogs barking if you hear that. Hopefully he gets wrangled. He's running around the backyard. Money. A lot of you are under the impression, because you look at Mark Zuckerberg, that the way to go generate, kind of generational wealth or financial independence is to go start a company. I would tell you there are much higher probability ways to go make money than there are than entrepreneurship. So yes, it's possible to make a tremendous amount of wealth in entrepreneurship. That is not the likely outcome, though. And so you better do it for the first three reasons, regardless of what the fourth one comes out as. Meaning, if you only make a modest living at it, you better do it because you want the three so bad that you're willing to make a modest living at it, is what I'm saying. If you're doing it because of the fourth bullet point, it's just not what I recommend. Go become an iBanker or something. You can go make a shit ton of money as an iBanker, and it's assured if you're not, if you're not incompetent, right? Yeah, maybe you don't make, you don't make quite as much money as some of these guys who have started unicorns, but it's almost assured, which it is not at all through entrepreneurial ventures. Okay, so how do you know if you have a good idea? The likelihood is, and I'm just saying this kind of for effect, the likelihood is right now you don't, is what I'm telling you. It's very hard to find really good ideas. So what I recommend is that you pick a career path that allows you to uncover good ideas in the future. So, pick a career path. Well, I'm going to talk about it a little bit here. So a good idea has you up on an up elevator, right? Meaning in a growing sector. And the up elevator idea came from a friend who had been working repeatedly, starting up businesses repeatedly in declining sectors. And he realized, like, what am I doing? Like, life is so much easier when the tide is rising than when you're arguing over, when you're trying to steal someone's share. And so pick a growing sector, right? Don't get on a down elevator. You can work your ass off on a down elevator, and the elevator's still going down. The interesting thing about an up elevator is you can kind of sit back a little bit sometimes and get some tailwind. The elevator is still going up, right? There's no sense in trying to swim against the current. Businesses are hard enough. So that means kind of a big available market. It doesn't necessarily need to be big at the time that you go into it, but it needs to be a growing sector. What I mean by a big available market is there's an opportunity to build a big enough business here that makes sense and that you can get rewarded for building. I'm convinced that big businesses are not that much more work to build than small businesses. So you might as well set out to build a big one. You're still going to work your butt off. You're still going to have all of the stress and all of the issues of starting a business, whether it's big or small. And my suggestion is find one that's going to be big, or it has the possibility to be big. You're really not going to work any harder at it than you will working at some small, couple person business that ultimately is not going to generate very much value for you, unless it absolutely checks off the first three bullet points that I talked about, right? Try to pick something that solves a real problem or meets a real existing need from consumers. Now, look, that's a double-edged sword, so you need to be careful. I'm not sure that you can point to the guys who founded Airbnb as solving a real problem or meeting an existing need. I think they saw a need that other people didn't see, but they certainly, you certainly couldn't have predicted the way they were going to solve for it. The need may not be obvious, but you need to be meeting a need. All right. People are not going to hand over their money to you unless you're solving a problem for them or meeting a need that they're willing to pay to have solved. Make sure it's fundable at your level of experience or with the level of experience of the team you choose to do it with. Right. So, I'm just saying, don't pick something that is going to be so capital intensive as your first project, because you're unlikely to be able to, there are exceptions to this, but you're unlikely to be able to raise tremendous amounts of money that are required for capital intensive startups if you haven't done it before, right? That type of money goes to people who've shown they can do this. And so I'm not telling you won't ever do it. I'm just telling you, as your first project, try to pick something that is fundable at the level of your experience. You can get people to fund you, okay? So let's assume you're not going to go right into starting your own business. All right. What can you do instead to still keep you on track to being an entrepreneur in the future? Okay. Try to get your arms around financial and cost accounting. I'm telling you, you'll be no more valuable to a company than if you really have a deep understanding of the cost structure and the key to and the key success factors of the business you're in. So really, that's the cost accounting side, right? Really understanding cost structures of companies is critical to companies surviving in the startup phase. It's really helpful to understand the interplay between an income statement and a balance sheet. It's kind of boring stuff. Go taking an accounting class is pretty boring. But and I hated it, to be honest, but at some point something clicked where I started to understand how an income statement and balance sheet really reflect the health of a company and how to look at them and understand how companies operate. You can then backward engineer that into understanding a lot more about how your business will be successful as well. So what I would tell you is suck it up and take a financial accounting class and a cost accounting class. Those basic building blocks will hold you in good stead no matter where you go. And for sure as an entrepreneur, okay? Get some leadership experience, guys, right? That experience includes recruiting, coaching, goal setting. I hate to say it, but firing people, right? And team building and leadership, setting goals for people and driving teams to attain their goals. That honestly, if you can do those things, that's usually the difference between success and not in a startup. Okay, building a team and getting them to buy in and drive to the goals you're setting for them. And without leadership experience, your recruiting is going to be not going to be good. And you end up recruiting a team that just simply can't get you to where you want to get. Okay. So look for a role right out of school that's going to give you some leadership experience or that has a path to leadership experience. Okay. Any kind of product design or development, online marketing or process development in a role right out of school, really helpful in a startup. All things that are incredibly marketable in a startup. Things you can hit the ground running and understand how to get your company going. All right. And you can learn these at a lot of different organizations. I would recommend choosing the best organization you can get a job at with the best reputation and one that is likely to be able to, one that is growing and as a result likely to be able to move you into increasing levels of responsibility. If assuming you're there for 2, 3, 4, 5 years to start off your career. Okay. That's interesting. They're going to, oh, hang on. Sorry. I know what's going on. Build your network and value it. Collect interesting, smart people in your lives. You'll find them out there and you'll know when you run into them. You may not like them all, but you'll realize they're talented and smart and interesting. Your job is not to collect people you love. Your job is to collect people who can help you learn going into the future and help you build something in the future. Like I said, they may not all be your best friend. They may not be people you pick for your best friend, but continue to build a network of a collection of really smart, interesting people. It will pay off over and over and over again. The reason I got an opportunity to make an investment in Peloton is because I really maintained a friendship and a great working relationship with the guy who would become the founder and CEO of it, because I felt like he was really talented and really fun to be with. And when I'd go to New York, when I was running a public company, when Active was public, I'd go to New York all the time to talk to the financial press and to analysts. I'd always try to have a drink with John, just because I felt like, I always learned from a dinner or a drink with John Foley. And so I'd always find him and find a way downtown, even if it had to be late at night after a full day of meetings of, let's link up and have a meal. It's developing that network of people who are truly talented and interesting and enrich your life that will lead to entrepreneurial opportunities in the future. And then I'd add finally that miles matter. Success in entrepreneurship is about pattern recognition. Success in business is about pattern recognition. The reason I get asked to join so many boards and to help out so many CEOs is frankly because I've seen so much stuff, guys. It's literally, this is not rocket science, but you might as well be making mistakes on someone else's dime than on yours. And getting miles under you and getting starting to build pattern recognition around what works in business and what doesn't, and starting to just over and over see these patterns of problems that occur and how to solve them will make you dramatically better as a CEO or a leader or a senior leader of a business in the future. Miles matter, guys. I'm telling you, even if it means going and failing a couple times. I'd rather hire someone who has failed a couple times if it seems like they failed for the right reasons than someone who hit it and easily built a unicorn because they happened to hit a seam in the market at exactly the right time and everything was fairly easy. The guy who failed or the woman who failed a couple times, far more valuable in an environment where we don't really understand what the challenges are going forward. Okay. So regardless of the initial direction of your career, here are the steps that I think will help prepare you, right? Take a role that expands rather than narrows your opportunities, meaning a sector or try to be in a sector or on a team that's going to give you broader opportunities in the future, not ones that are just going to narrow your opportunities. I'm telling you, if you go join a real estate firm in some specific functional vertical, you're going to have a hard time taking that experience and expanding it to a tech startup. You just are, guys, right? So go find roles that are going to expand your opportunities, not narrow them. Surround yourself with strong, ethical people. And the reality is they're going to be your future co-founders, right? So that's, again, building your network. And make career decisions based on how they will grow you, not based on the money you're offered. I'm telling you right now that if you want to be an entrepreneur in the future, the job that offers you the most money, if you go get 3 job offers coming out of Colgate, the job that offers you the most money is likely to be the job that will serve you the least in entrepreneurial ventures going forward. The best jobs know that they don't have to pay you the biggest money. The ones that are offering the biggest money are ones that are almost by definition narrowing your opportunities in the future. Don't make a career decision based on $30,000 or $50,000 more money, financial difference. I know that sounds like a lot. I'm telling you, it's nothing compared to the generational wealth you can generate in the future by choosing the right job now. $30,000 or $50,000 a year is nothing compared to what you're going to generate in the future. So find the things that are going to help you to generate real wealth when you're in your 40s, late 30s, 40s. That's when real wealth is generally generated, if you're motivated by money. What you make between now and your mid 30s kind of doesn't matter. What matters is the experience you're getting and how that lines you up to go get roles in high probability startups with real chunks of equity that generate real wealth. Does that make sense? All right. Keep your personal cost structure low. If you go get yourself a car loan and go get yourself a house loan, it's far harder to leave a job to go to a startup that's not going to pay you anything for the first 6 months. You will not do it. So just keep your personal cost structure low. Continue to keep it low. Don't get into debt. Don't get too far into debt. If you do, I'm telling you, you won't have the courage to go do a startup. It'll never happen. Way easier to stay at the job you're in because you're managing to cover your debt than to take the financial risk of going and doing a startup. I think you have to assume when you go and do a startup, it's not going to succeed. And as a result, find ones that are going to give you a really enriching experience that are going to make you even better at the next startup. Eventually, one will succeed. Okay? That's all I got. I don't know. Hopefully that was kind of helpful. Now, let me try to Here we go. All right. I don't know how long I've been at it. 20 minutes, 25 minutes, a little longer than I thought. Sorry. I tried to boil it down to just like the meaty stuff, but I'm happy to launch into any number of questions or however you guys want to do this. What's interesting. Happy to talk about whatever. Come on.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
What skills or personal attributes would you credit most with your success in running country or companies? And in the same kind of vein, what kind of skills are you looking for in those that you're hiring?
Okay, so it's funny that you say that because I try to think of, and this is gonna, I don't know if I want to launch into this, but I kind of think of success being dependent on some number of skills, right? And let's call it a dozen skills. I'm sure it's a lot more than that, but let's think of it as a dozen skills where everyone has a different fingerprint on that. So think of it as kind of a bar chart with each skill for a dozen different bars. And every person you run into has a slightly different signature on that. So you're really good at some stuff, you kind of suck at other stuff, you're kind of okay at everything. There's no one who's great at everything. So when people tell you that, you just know they're too insecure to tell you what they're not good at, right? So there are a couple things I think I kind of top box on, and some things that I maybe not quite zero out on, but I'm not so great at. I top box on pattern recognition. And being able to see larger patterns in what looks like really disparate data. I am really good at recruiting and identifying performers. And even then, as good as I am at it, I think if I can hit a 60% success rate on recruiting, that's kind of knocking the ball out of the park. That's doing really, really well. I am good at painting a target for people to go after. Sorry, painting a target is a military term. We used to put a laser on a target. So I'm good at identifying what the target is for the next year and getting people rallied around, a team rallied around that and moving towards that kind of in unison. I am not so good I mean, look, I can do this, but I really don't enjoy it. And as a result, over the long term, I'm not so good at every day driving a sales team to their goals. I know how to do it. I can do it. I really dislike constant having to constantly supervise people. And so here's the thing. I just hire people who are really good at that. I'm really self-aware about the stuff I'm not good at, and I'm really self-aware about the stuff I'm decent at. And what I try to do is I try to build a team that collectively top boxes all of those, whatever those skill sets are, right? What I would say is probably the number one thing I bring to kind of the table on these things is just what my COO at Active termed professional will. Like I just will shit to get done. Like I just do not give up. I'm incredibly driven to not fail, mostly because I guess I'm just afraid of failure. And so I come with a level of professional will that most people don't have. And I would say, candidly, the vast majority of successful CEOs and COOs and senior managers in senior leadership in tech startups, that's the difference between failure and success eventually. Is do you just have the will to get to your goal? Because there are a lot of times when you're going to come home and be ready to give up. And I've seen a lot of CEOs give up on stuff that I think was savable, but they just didn't have it in them anymore. So, by the way, that doesn't make me the easiest guy to live with, right? So I'm not suggesting that these are terribly social skills, right? There are a lot of us, and look, I'm not one of these anti-social guys, but there are a lot of guys with a shit ton of professional will who you really don't want to sit next to on an airplane to Hong Kong, right? Like it doesn't make you terribly social. So that's what I would suggest are the most important skills. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. Come on, guys. I didn't piss anyone off or make anyone angry or at all. Yeah, Seth, go ahead.
Okay, so in your first few minutes, you mentioned how you spent a few years at BCG.
Yeah.
during your talk, you also mentioned that some company that you're least likely to end up founding a startup if you and making a lot, or you're less likely to found a startup that makes a lot of money than as with the motive of making money.
Yep.
Than if you just go into finance or some other field.
Yep.
Do you think that those things are mutually exclusive? I mean, a lot of people will start in one of those high-paying professions and then leave after a few years.
Yeah. So that absolutely. I think you're thinking about it the right way. Part of the reason I went to BCG is because they backed the truck up with cash, right? And I had a bunch of school debt that I wanted to pay off from grad school before I knew I wanted to go do a startup. And I wanted to go into that startup debt free. And if I knew if I put a couple of years in at BCG, I would be out from debt, and I will have sat in a lot of boardrooms and looked at a lot of strategic issues. And so start to develop that pattern recognition that I talk about. So there is nothing wrong with going into finance. I'd be careful about where you go. I probably wouldn't go into, private wealth management. I don't think that's teaching you anything to start a business, right? But if you go into the iBanking side, that's pretty interesting. You're looking at a lot of different businesses. You're looking at a lot of income statements and balance sheets, and you're starting to understand what drives businesses. What I will tell you is that for my friends who went into that, the ones who stayed for more than 2 or 3 years, it becomes really hard to leave because the money gets so big that it becomes really hard to leave. I was never terribly motivated by money. In fact, for a good number of jobs, I kept I kept making less in the new job than I was making in the previous job, right? But that didn't matter to me. What mattered to me was it going to be an enriching experience surrounded by people who I was going to learn from and who I respected and who I knew I was going to love operating with. Those are the things that drove my career decisions. I figured if I worked really hard, I was surrounded by really good people and on really high performing teams. And candidly, I was in the tech sector. I figured between those three, the money would come eventually. And it did. But I never once made a career decision based on money. Wait, hang on. With the exception of BCG. Although BCG I was really excited to go to, but money was a factor in that I had so much debt, I wanted to pay that debt off.
Okay, thank you for your answer.
Yeah, of course. Come on.
Yeah. So at one point you mentioned that somebody who failed in whatever industry you were in could bring something to the table. At what point do multiple failures become a red flag rather than like a benefit to your team?
Yeah. So was that Connor? I couldn't quite tell who was talking.
Sorry, my camera's not working. Luke Spagnoli.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Luke. Yeah. So look, that's a funny one, right? Like I said, you want them to have failed for the right reasons. And that's sometimes a difficult one to determine, right? You're absolutely right. If you fail over and over and over again, maybe there's a pattern, maybe the pattern recognition is starting to set in, right? But a failure or two based on for the right reasons, I'm okay with if they went and if I'm pretty convinced they learned from it. I can tell you, I learned more from what I consider to be kind of a C- startup, which is basically a failure, that I did in between BCG and City Search. I learned more from that, or as much from that 2 years there as I did from all the success I had at the 2 other firms that I started. It was incredibly painful, but it kind of failed for the right reasons. It probably, it was probably the wrong business to start at the time. There was probably nothing we could really do to make it dramatically more successful than it was. And at some point, the entire management team, all of us, decided, okay, we're done. We're having to work too hard this is just too hard for what we're getting out of this, the success we're having. And we moved on, all like a shit ton smarter for it. So yeah, at some point, if everything you touch kind of dies, there's probably a problem. But a couple failures, I got no problem with, as long as you can explain why it failed and it makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, Jack.
So I know you mentioned how picking industries that were on, or picking sectors that were on the up. I guess this is a more specific question, but what industries do you see on the rise right now?
What sectors are on the up?
Yeah, what sectors?
Well, I'll give you an example. Sometimes it's really easy, sometimes it's not so easy. You don't, when Henry Ford came along, you don't want to be investing in a buggy whip manufacturer, right? That let's be really clear, right? So that's the really obvious ones, right? What I would look at is the sector just growing? Like, can you look at the market and know that there are a whole ton of growth companies in the sector and doing well, right? Can you look at a problem that you can reasonably anticipate is going to become a larger and larger problem as a result of, say, technological change that you can solve for before it's a real sector, but you can anticipate it's going to be a sector? Look, with the success of Peloton, I went and got asked to invest in another networked fitness company, home fitness company, that I did. I think there's a rising tide in home fitness. I think it's fitness all of a sudden used to be a terrible business to be in, honestly, and now the margins are really, really good. And so I think there's room for multiple players in that sector, or they'll all get gobbled up by Peloton. What else? Look, healthcare. If you want to take it on, healthcare is a huge problem that we need to solve, right? Care of the elderly is a huge problem that we need to solve here quickly. I would look at re-education of workforce is a huge problem we need to solve here fairly rapidly. Just look at macro changes in our economy, and my guess is you can drill down in and find, here's an interesting time, right? You're as shitty as COVID is for going through college. What does it mean from the standpoint of what businesses are going to be launched around how we know we now behave around pandemics? And if we assume pandemics are actually going to increase in incidence rather than decrease, what does that mean? What should we be investing in? To me, those would be interesting sectors to look at. That make sense?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Got time for one more question.
Come on, Kate. You're the only woman in here, and you're right in the middle of the screen. You got something for me?
I guess what advice would you give for sophomores looking for opportunities this summer? What would you say is a good skill sets to build?
Yeah. Look, I don't know what the situation is these days with internships. Does everyone do summer internships like before junior year? Is that kind of common?
Yeah, that's really common.
And there are internships out there?
A lot of things have gone virtual, but we've seen a lot of employers coming back either for virtual or for starting to be in person, hopefully.
Yeah, I would think it would start to be I would hope it would start to be in person by summer. So here's what I think, Kate. I actually don't really care what sector it's in. I want you to be surrounded by a really high performing team. Go find a team you really like that's getting stuff done and is populated with people who are smart and driven. I would hold that as honestly, as the acid test over everything else. Go surround yourself with good people. You'll learn, no matter what the sector is, you'll learn. All right. So, you could be at some giant tech company. You could go out to, there's nothing wrong with going out to Google and doing a summer internship at Google. You're going to be surrounded by people who are smart and driven. You could do the same thing in the finance sector. You could do the same thing in the manufacturing sector. Just find a team that you're convinced is populated with really smart, hard driving people, because that's going to set the example for you of what it takes to drive a business. And again, start getting those miles under you, the right miles under you for pattern recognition. That make sense?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Sorry for cold calling you there.
It's okay.
All right.
Perfect. Well, Dave, thank you so much for this. I was taking copious notes myself as you were talking. I can only imagine the students got just as much out of this. We really appreciate your time and just hearing from all of your experiences and all of your insights. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, guys, I'm happy to send you that presentation if anyone really cares, but I'm happy to send it out. It's, you know, I think it's less than, you know, it's like 200 words. I don't know. It's really short. If you know, Carolyn, if people are interested in it, I'm happy to email it to you. There's nothing secret about it.
Great. That sounds perfect.
All right, guys, reach out to me if you'd like. I do tend to be busy. And so if you don't hear back from me, like show that you've got some professional will, like don't give up. I'm happy to talk with any of you about decisions you're making around jobs. That's it. That's all I got. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, so we've got 13 minutes left. I really want us to take some time and continue on with what we were doing last week. Last week, we really focused on personal individual reflection around those talents, interests, passion, and skills. This week, I want to make things a little more interactive. So we're actually going to move into breakout rooms. Before we do that, I'm going to take you kind of through how I want you to be thinking about this next stage and what you're going to be doing in those small groups. All right, so last week we talked about our individual tips. So those unique qualities that each of us have, talents, interests, passion, and skills. Today, we're gonna start to think about how we might bring our unique skills to the table in order to create something new. And also moving from individual reflection around this to group collaboration. And this is for a couple of reasons. As an entrepreneur, you're going to be working in a team. And this is something that Dave highlighted throughout his experience. There's no story of a successful entrepreneur who's got to where they are without a team. Even the most famous ones, the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Steve Jobs, it wasn't just them. They always had other people who were working with them, whether they were partners, whether they were their C-suite executives, employees, whatever that looked like. So ultimately, being a successful entrepreneur is not just about you as an individual, but it's about finding the right teammates, working with them, building the team, managing the team, all of those types of things. And as I talked about last week, and Dave really hinted at in his initial Q&A response, is your strengths are going to dictate what your role in the team is. And so part of this exercise is really thinking about how can you take a group of individuals who each have different skills and combine those to create something new and to form a productive team. So before we dive in, I want you to take just 1 minute. Although we reflected on tips last week, going into your group conversations, I want you to have written down just one superpower and one kryptonite. So if you had to think of one really strong thing that you would bring to a team, what would that be? Would it be your organizational skills? Would it be your math skills? Perhaps communication, perhaps computer science, whatever that is, what would that superpower be? And then on the other coin, what is your kryptonite? What's that thing that you're just terrible at? Maybe you are really unorganized. Maybe you hate, being the people person. What is that role that you do not want, or that skill set that you just know is not your strength? I'll give you a minute. Once you've kind of identified those, just give me a thumbs up. That way I know when we can move forward. All right, I see 1 thumbs up. 2, perfect. 3, okay. Good, looks like just about everybody's there. Awesome. All right, great. Okay, so we're gonna take 5 minutes in breakout rooms. As a group, I want you to come up with a product or a service that's going to use each of your unique skills on the team. And the idea is you can, I want you to have fun with this. Come up with whatever you want, whether it's, I won't even give suggestions, but basically think about what you might create as a group and what each of your roles are going to be within that. So in that breakout, I want you to do 3 things. Let me find the chat here. First, just quickly introduce yourselves, share your superpower, and share your kryptonite. Then spend some open time brainstorming what your product or service is going to be and what each of your roles are. And then, but when you wrap up, just quickly talk about who's going to be kind of doing the report back to the group. Any questions? Okay, awesome. All right, so then I'm going to put them in for 6 minutes. That way we have a couple minutes at the end for report back. Those should open now, and you can pop into your breakouts. Oh, sorry, Connor. Let me put you into one.
I just joined on my computer. I was on my phone, so.
Oh, sure. Yep. All right. Okay, there you are. All right, welcome back. First group is coming back. The others should be back momentarily. How did it go? Did you have enough time?
Yeah, it was good.
Nice.
Yep.
All right. What did you all think of Dave's career and what he shared?
I thought it was pretty cool. He seemed pretty successful, and I don't know, there's a lot of information that like wasn't really suggested in the past, so I thought that was interesting.
I kind of like how he didn't just highlight the good parts of entrepreneurship, but also the immense difficulties that come with it.
Yeah, I think it was a really realistic portrayal.
How did you like it?
I thought it was great. I think one thing that I really appreciated was he made, obviously Dave is incredibly successful. He's on the board of these companies, he's invested in Peloton, like it's amazing. And if you think about kind of how could you actually get there, I think it seems like unimaginable. I really liked how he made it seem so approachable, whether after you graduate, you go work at a startup as just a team member and you go from there, or whether you work in consulting or something where you have transferable skills. And I would definitely say, especially for anyone who's thinking about the tech industry or being at like a high growth startup, I lived out in Silicon Valley for 6 years, and everything he talked about is so doable. It's just like, it's a whole ecosystem. You can work at any of these exciting companies. It's, people change jobs frequently. You meet awesome people, awesome teams. And for me, I also went to a liberal arts college on the East Coast, and I'd never been to California before. And so I think one thing I would say is like, it is really feasible. If that's what you want in life, you can get there, whether it's in Silicon Valley or in the New York startup space or an LA startup space. There's definitely a path. All right, it looks like we've got all of our groups here. So I would love just, a quick minute from each of you. Tell us about your idea, your team member, and your team member roles. Why don't we, Benji, Connor, Daniel, and Seth, why don't we start with your team?
Well, we kind of just discussed our superpowers and kryptonite, and it became apparent very quickly that our superpowers somewhat aligned as far as like being able to talk to people and connecting with people, but our kryptonites were kind of around procrastination and organization, which were the two main ones. So I guess if we were going to move into a business, it would have to be something to do with consulting or talking to people. And Seth said he is good at handling big projects. So something where we can talk to people or lobby or help out there, I guess. But we would definitely need some outside help in the organization and keeping things on track aspect of our company.
Fantastic. Yeah, that sounds great. And you've already learned a lot. This is something the teams in the incubator go through as they're thinking about how they expand. And a lot of it's identifying what skills are we missing, where do we need to hire people, those types of things. Great, thank you. Okay, Jack, Kate, Nick, and Ryan.
So we came up with something more in line with the fitness industry. So like more like a software product that would give personalized diet plans and workout plans, and kind of in line with the home fitness industry. We'd have the ability for people to put in what kind of equipment they want to use, and then they could get like personalized. So like if they're at home and they only have access to like certain weights and not go to the gym, the technology could give them specific workouts that they could complete. And we also talked about like superpowers. So mine was communication. So I would be more in charge of like marketing and sales.
Awesome. What about the other team members? What are your roles going to be?
I think that I said my strength was like organization and detail, and so and also Ryan's was that too. So we were gonna like organize like I guess it was like an app or like a website, like organize how the layout of it, like the spreadsheets and like the information, like to try and generate it to like produce the result we're looking for.
And then mine was, I'm more the back end, actually developing the software, working on the tech behind it, because my skills are more aligned with applied mathematics and using computer analysis to get things done. So that's kind of how we chose to organize our little startup.
Nice. Sounds like you're ready to join TIA with your idea. You've got your team laid out. You've got your idea laid out. I like it. All right. And then last but not least, Joe, Moises, and Luke.
Okay. So, so first we discussed our, strengths, weaknesses, and that kind of gave us the idea of doing something that was similar to a dating app, but for jobs. So like LinkedIn, but rather than the individuals being the focus, it would take a single project and then automatically recommend people based on their strengths and weaknesses. That way it has the same effect as LinkedIn, but without the detail, and it was more of just a sped up version of that.
Nice. That's great. And did you have a sense of how you were going to manage the team based on your skills?
Oh, we didn't get to that.
Oh, it's all good. I like the idea. Fantastic. So next, when we meet for the last time on Thursday, I'll talk a little bit more about the TIA incubator. But for any of you who are interested in really getting hands-on with entrepreneurship, that's a fantastic opportunity that you have during your time here at Colgate. And so much of what the incubator is about is doing exactly this kinds of things, coming up with your idea, developing your team, and then actually diving in and executing. So I'll talk more about that next time. It was great to see you all. I'll see you on Thursday. I'll send a follow-up email. In the meantime, if you have any questions or anything more, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.